TJ Talks, a session about professional practice.
Hello and welcome. This is TJ Talks. We used to be TJ Wow. We have rebranded, refreshed, updated. That new and improved. Does everybody hate that term as much as I do? Well, we're not new. We've been around for a while, but we are definitely improved. This is me. I am Jo Cook. I'm the Deputy Editor of TJ. I am loving hosting these conversations, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Now, this is a TJ Talks practice session. We are focusing very much on making sure that we have something tangible that we can take away with us. And I think this quote from Zig Ziglar really kind of sums it up for me, is that you don't actually have to be great to start something, but you know what? You have to start something to be great. And I think that really kind of highlights where we're going with these sessions. So you've got the chat window. Please use that anytime. Share links, share highlights, ask questions of whoever is in the chat if you want to. Also, we've got a question and answer pod at the very bottom of the screen, and you've got just about enough room to type a question in there. So if there's a question you'd like Chris to address, I promise I will see it and I will try and kind of ask those questions to Chris for you. You can also join us on Twitter. We have John, who is our editor of online. He will be tweeting under #TJ Talks. So please do make sure you go and share any kind of little learning nuggets, anything that you want to focus on. The session is being recorded. All of our recordings are on our YouTube channel, all accessed on our website. Go and have a look at those another day. And I think it's about time that we introduced our speaker. I'm so pleased to have Krystyna with us today. She is not only an amazing L&D professional, she's also a very good friend of mine. So this is going to be a great fun to have a chat with her. Let's bring her video on the screen and let's hear more from Chris and an introduction. So Chris, I know who you are because I've had the pleasure of spending lots of time with you, but please unmute and just tell everyone who you are so that they can find out too.
So it's great to be here, Jo. I'm hoping you can hear me loud and clear. And I'm Krystyna Gadd, founder of How to Accelerate Learning. And we help people to get better at learning with the view of improving performance. So not just fluffy stuff. We want to really make a difference. I'm also author of How Not to Waste Your Money on Training. It was just published back in May, and that's been an exciting journey. So this topic is quite a hot one for me, and I think it's a very pertinent one for me as well, because it's something that I've been thinking about for quite a long time, and it's a cheeky question that I ask on workshops as well, and it's usually met with some blank faces as well.
That sounds interesting. So what are the, you obviously think there's a difference between training needs analysis and learning needs analysis. I'm going to take the devil's advocate point of view here, Chris, and I'm going to say it doesn't matter what you call it as long as you find out what training they need. So I've been particularly obtuse there. What are your thoughts on why there is a difference? And in the chat window, what do you guys think?
So when I ask this question, I get a range of answers from, well, training's more personal and learning needs analysis is broader. And I would agree with one part of that learning needs analysis is broader. But it's a little bit, there's an analogy that I use that if you've got a hammer, everything's going to look like a nail. And so if you're doing a training needs analysis, then you're pretty much blinkered. And you're going to be looking out what training needs will pop out the other end. So whatever analysis you do, you'll be looking out to see what training will fit that issue or that problem. If you do a learning needs analysis, then that takes it a bit broader, because I've got a list of 100 ways to learn. And so there are lots and lots of different ways to learn. So if you are doing a learning needs analysis, then again, it's broader still. So you're not just looking at one solution, you're looking at many different solutions. Now, I would add to this debate that, and also I'm going to try using my Jedi mind tricks again. I haven't used them for quite a while, but I like to use them, I like to practice them. I would suggest that whenever somebody is doing a learning needs analysis, that they also have one ear and a beady eye out for anything else that might be going on. So a needs analysis, if you like, and looking at other things that might be going wrong within the organisation. So asking questions about whether communication is okay, whether they've got sufficient resources, whether there are any broken processes or systems. And so I would say the difference between a training needs analysis and a learning needs analysis is the breadth and of the solutions that you can provide, and it makes you less blinkered. But I would suggest pushing on a little bit further as well, if people dare, to actually look deeper to see what's really going on under the bonnet of the organisation, because you can find all sorts of things, and I've got some examples I can share.
I think you bring up two kind of main important points right at the beginning there. One is that there's a spider climbing down from my ceiling. That's not what I wanted to see. And I don't like spiders, so luckily it's crawling away. That wasn't the point you were coming up with, Chris. Sorry, I just spider.
No, that wasn't the point.
The two main points you came up with, one was very much around, well, if you're looking for training needs, you're going to find training needs. If you're looking for learning needs, that's better maybe, but you're still going to be focusing on that. Whereas if you're looking at the business as a whole, and it's maybe another conversation, but taking that consultative approach, then that's going to be better for the business all round. And Olivia has said in chat, I actually prefer performance gap analysis. And I guess I see all training and learning as the process to get to a desired behaviours, and those behaviours ought to manifest in desired behaviours. What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
My preference is still for needs analysis, because again, it's when you put something in front of the analysis, a word in front of it, you're assuming what the solution is almost, that there's a performance need or whatever. And I'm all for targeting performance. But when you're doing a needs analysis, when you're doing that sort of broad look into what's going on under the bonnet, you could be looking for all sorts of different things. It could be, as I said, communications that have broken down. It could be a lack of resources, lack of staff. It could be something that's not working. If somebody is in a call centre and they've got a script they have to work through, maybe somebody hasn't thought it through properly, whatever. It could be any number of things. But I prefer performance gap analysis to perhaps training needs analysis and learning needs analysis, because I think that's where we in L&D should be looking. We should be looking at how we can actually improve performance, because otherwise, at the end of the day, I just think, what are we doing? If we're not actually helping to improve performance, what are we actually doing? I think
you make a great point. So if we're looking at the performance gap analysis or the business analysis, or, we can come back to discussing this terminology as we go through. What does that mean in reality? So the words are important, but let's say we're internal to a company. A manager has come to us and said, the typical thing, my team need time management training. It's a great example we all use. How do we approach that? Do we say we'll do a training needs analysis, a learning needs analysis, a performance gap analysis? What do we do in that situation, Chris?
That's a really good question, because I think a lot of people get caught in the corridor or passing by. Oh yes, by the way, we need some training. We need it delivered in a few weeks or whatever. And, people get stuck for a response. And being people, we want to provide something that's useful. And so we tend to leap into solution mode. And so what I recommend to people is to have some questions in your back pocket, not literally in your back pocket, but to think of some questions that if you get caught, then you will come out with these questions. And I've got a model that I use. It's HIRE. And the first lot of questions are, so tell me what's happening. So you ask questions all around what's happening. And then the next lot, when you are clear about what might be happening or not happening or who's involved and so on, you ask about the issues. So the HIRE, I stands for issues. So what are the issues? And who's involved in those? What's at fault? What do you think's happening? When did it start? What's working well? Then the next part of the model is the ramifications. So if we solve this problem, what will happen as a result of it? If we don't solve this problem, what will happen as a result of it, or not happen as a result of it? So what is going to happen basically? How will you know that you have solved the problem? And then E is for expectations, is what do you expect to happen out of all of this? You know, how will you measure it? What will you see? What will be different? How will it impact the organisation? Will it improve performance in some way? And so that, for me, is a good starting point, is to ask those questions. Now, I've got an example where I went into a client and there was a whole shopping list of different training courses that they wanted. They had done some sort of analysis. I wasn't really sure, and it was very flattering to get asked in. And when I started to ask these deeper questions, there was a lot of I don't knows coming back at me. And so one of the questions I asked was, you know, in 6 months' time, when I've delivered this training for you, and they're still not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're still not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're doing all sorts of things that you never even dreamt of that you wanted them to do, who are you going to blame? And he looked at me, the managing director, and said, well, you, Chris. And I said, okay. So I went through every single one of these training courses that they thought they needed. And the first one I picked on was conflict management. So I asked them, I said, well, okay, so tell me about the conflict that's going on. How much conflict is going on, and which teams are involved in it? Which individuals? Is it company-wide? When does it happen? Are there particular issues? So I asked lots and lots of questions. And again, a lot of I don't knows came back from those questions. And I went through virtually all of the different training courses. And eventually the managing director said, Chris, we need you to do a detailed needs analysis. And so I'm going, yes, this is what we need to do, because when I asked him why he wanted this, the question for me was just so woolly, the answer to that question. He said, oh, well, the senior managers have had some training. We thought it'd be nice for the team leaders to get some training as well. And I'm like thinking, how do you measure this niceness, you know, on a niceometer? And, you know, I like to be invited back again where I work. And so with clients, and so I want to deliver some value. And so if it's just about being nice, we can all be nice, but can we deliver something which is going to make a difference and improve performance in some way?
And Andrew Jacobs is here in the session today, and he's probably just groaning at the idea of having training because it's nice. And I think, you know, yeah, training can be nice. People see it as a reward sometimes, or a perk, but we know we can and should do so much more. Now, speaking of Andrew, he put in the chat a little while ago that the smart L&D professional will be happy to confront those additional challenges from the business, like you're mentioning. My question in the chat was, can everyone do that? Certainly I've been in roles where, you know, anybody who knows me knows that I'm, let's call it broad thinking. Some people would say, get back in your box. And I would see some of these issues and want to get involved. But the organisation was quite large and had me in a particular box of training this particular thing. So some of that will be down to my experience, my skills, how I approach things. Let's say we're in that position in a company where it's a little bit more restrictive. We're not a consultant going in like you were and being able to have that conversation. Let's just think about that and just go, well, how can we start that conversation? How can we start doing that? And we'll tackle it kind of at another angle in a moment. What are your thoughts?
The easiest way to start, I think, and I didn't make this up myself. I heard it from a lady who used to work for Telefonica, and it was their story that I came across, which I found really, really fascinating, about how they moved from being an order taker to a more consultative and proactive approach. And what they started to do was, when they got cornered or asked to deliver some training, They just said to the stakeholder, so could I just grab 10 minutes of your time where we can actually just really dig deeper into what it is that you're asking us to do, so that we can design something and deliver something that's going to meet your needs. And if they could talk there and then great. If they had to reschedule something, then that was fine as well. There weren't many instances of people actually saying no. They were a bit taken aback, because it's a change in behaviour. Because when you go to the training department, then you expect for them to dispense some training when you ask them. That's what the expectation is. So when they come back at you with some questions or wanting to know more about the problems, it's an unexpected behaviour. And so they were taken aback. But within 18 months to 2 years, what they found was happening was that instead of them having to go through all of those questions and ask them and dig deeper, they were coming to the training department, and I think they'd rebranded to learning development by then. They came back and said, right, okay, so this is our business case for this particular issue. So can you look at this and see what you can deliver on this? And I think that's a much better approach. And I think if you're expecting things to happen overnight, I think that's probably a little bit unrealistic, because there will be expectations that you are going to deliver training if you're called a training department, and people just want a quick fix sometimes. So starting those conversations, I think that's the brave bit that you can do, and you can start having them. But you have to be consistent. So it's no good just one person out of the whole team saying this and then everybody else doing the same old, same old.
Good points. So apologies, my webcam has stopped working, but I'm not going to log out and log in again because we don't need to see me. Chris is the star of the show. I said that to her before we started. So I think you make some great points here about not expecting that overnight change, which we're all guilty of wanting in all sorts of parts of our lives. Nancy in chat says, I've had similar experience as Chris's example. When digging deeper, this will help create a more informative and valued learning offering. Love that, Nancy. Thank you. And she adds, I assumed it was the norm to investigate the core objectives of a course. Sadly, Nancy, it is not. Absolutely not, sadly. So let's come back to this original question about learning needs analysis or training needs analysis. And we've got other terms such as performance gap analysis. Is there a recommendation that you would say to people of like, you should call it this? Or is it more to do with how you do it rather than what you call it?
I think we should try and move away from using too much L&D speak. We should speak the language of the business and have conversations with people about what the biggest challenges are. Because the other thing that I hear quite frequently is that when you as an L&D person go and ask one of the stakeholders what are the key objectives of the training that you want to deliver, they can't always articulate it. And when you ask them what their issues are, they can't always articulate it. Or what are you trying to achieve here? And so I think we need to get more skilled at coming alongside people and really asking questions and being curious. I think curiosity is one of the best skills that we can develop. And I think it is a skill as well, and you have to listen. To be curious as well, you have to listen to what people are saying. And so I'm not saying that people should say to the stakeholders, we're going to do a needs analysis or a performance gap analysis, whatever. I think we need to use simple language. I want to find out what your challenges are, and I want to help you to meet those challenges in line with what the organisation is trying to achieve as well. And you can talk about objectives and how you're going to measure things as well. But I think we should avoid L&D speak. I don't know what anybody else thinks about that, but those are my thoughts. I'm happy if anyone disagrees with that.
I'd love to hear you disagreeing with Chris, just for fun, if nothing else. So do let us know in the chat window. We've had a great question from Andrew in the question and answer pod. Thank you very much for that. Andrew asks, What do we do about managers who think they know about learning and want training needs analysis?
That is a really good question. I have come across clients, I'm smiling here because I can think about one particular person which will remain nameless forever. And we had a conversation about objectives, and I presented some objectives to them for a solution that we've been talking about. And he said to me something like, "Those aren't objectives. What I would prefer to see is things like, by the end, you will understand and you will know and you will learn," and all sorts of woolly words that I would sort of definitely put a no-no. And it's very difficult, I think, if you come across somebody who thinks they know about learning, but I would get curious. I think for me, rather than confrontation, curiosity has really served me well. And so if I had somebody coming to me and saying, "Look, I want you to do a TNA because we've got some issues and I know it's going to be a training solution, so I want you to do a training needs analysis," then I would just get really curious about it. So tell me more about this issue. And is there anything else going on besides that as well? Have you spoken to dot, dot, dot? What other issues do you think might be underlying here? And again, I would go back to that HIRE, that higher model as well. I would ask questions around it. And unless they can say with confidence, a good answer to each one of those things, I think in asking those questions, you will be, I suppose, demonstrating that perhaps there is another way, there's something else. And rather than confronting them and saying, "No, we don't need a TNA, we need a learning needs analysis or a needs analysis," I would go down the questioning route, because I think a confrontation could just end up being a standoff, that you say, "No, we definitely need a learning needs analysis or a needs analysis," and they say, "No, we need a TNA, I know that." So Andrew, my answer to you is I would go with curiosity and keep asking questions. And if they keep saying, "I don't know," then I would then suggest, well, maybe I could look into all of these areas that you don't know. Maybe I could dig a little deeper. How about we come back after I've dug a little deeper into this?
Thank you very much for that, Chris. And I'm sure Andrew will let us know in the chat window any thoughts he wants to add on that. And I wanted to ask you one quick question before we go into a reflection. And sadly, I can't put this up on screen now, but in your book, you on page 57, you mention the levels of needs analysis, and you've got a triangle, and you start with the job role at the top, then the individual, then the department and team, and then the organisation. So you've got those different layers or levels, or zooming in or zooming out, whichever way you want to look at that. Can you just tell us why it's important to you that you define it that way, that you have those levels?
I don't think we should be rigid about it. The model is great, as all models are, and I am never prescriptive and you must use this, you must use that. The model is there to alert people to the fact that when you do any sort of needs analysis, it's targeted at a particular area. And so, for instance, the organisational one, that's something that will affect the whole organisation. So let's say that we are implementing a new accounting system, which is going to affect a large number of people, including things like it's going to have holidays, all sorts of things in it, and lots of people need to know about it. Then the needs analysis will be organisationally done so that you know what the whole organisation needs. So different departments will need different levels of learning. Some might just need a job aid, some might just need a very quick webinar, some of them might need more rigorous training. Then you might have an issue that's happening. Let's say sales are down in a particular area, and it might be just specifically to do with that area. And so you would start to look at just that division or that team. So the needs analysis would just be for that group of people. And the reason you need to know the distinction is because different methods of analysis are suitable for groups, and some are suitable for individuals. Some will yield lots of numbers, and some will yield lots of information, some comments, and some qualitative data. So you need to know what level you're doing it at so that you know who to target. So if you've got a very large organisation and you need to do an organisation-wide needs analysis, and you decide that you're going to do this through one-to-one interviews, it's going to take you forever and a day. So a more suitable way of starting off might be by surveying people. So from the survey, you might get some numbers which indicate where the problem actually lies. Once you know where the problem actually lies, you might then perhaps use a focus group or get a bunch of people together or interview people, specific people, when you've identified where the area is, where the problem is. And so knowing the level, you can choose the right methods, you can get the right sort of information, you can get the right mix of quantitative and qualitative data, because the quantitative stuff is great for highlighting where the problems are. The qualitative stuff actually helps uncover what the issues might be. And then the other levels that we have in that model, we've got job role and we've got individual as well. So sometimes there's an issue which is just to do with one person. And that person may be somebody who's new. And so the issue is that they're new to the role and they need to be skilled in lots of different things, which they're not skilled at the moment. So you could do a very quick analysis on them to find out where they are now and where they need to be. And then there's also a job role analysis. So if you are putting together a new team and you have lots of new roles that are going to be created, you might want to do an analysis on, well, if people come into that role, what sort of learning or what support might they need in that particular role? Does that make sense, Jo?
It brings that whole triangle together now of those different roles that or different levels, sorry, that you might go through. So I hopefully that was useful to other people as well. Thank you for clarifying that. And what we're going to do now is going to reflection piece. So Chris, we're coming off of webcam now and we're going to move into our reflection. And everybody, there's another chat window on your screen. If you're on a tablet or a mobile device, you might need to click on a separate part of your screen for that, or just use the main chat window, whichever you want. But I'd like to know from this conversation, what is it you're actually going to do? So just a really quick reflection. We've been through a variety of different topics. You've added stuff to the chat window and your thoughts. And actually, Neve has said in the chat window, I like to ask, what is it you're trying to fix? And then follow up with a series of whys until the manager runs out of steam, which I think is a great way of doing it. We often say channel our inner 2-year-old without necessarily going, why, but definitely kind of asking variations on that theme. So thank you very much for that, Neve. And so what is it we're going to do? What is it we're going to take away from this conversation and think about for another day? Debbie's got in here, ask why, and I know Debbie's got a couple of young grandchildren, so I think she's definitely going to channel her inner child. Uma in the main chat says, just be persistent at asking more penetrative questions is a takeaway. That's absolutely great, Uma, thank you. And in the other chat window, Nancy says, investigate further into the higher model, and I've put a link there to Chris's book about that as well. So thank you very much. So please do keep adding some items there at the top right about what you're thinking you will do now. And thank you so much, Krystyna, for your time today. Really appreciate all of your thoughts and comments on this and your insight and your experience. That was absolutely great. All of our webinars are available online. You'll be able to go and have a look at this and share it with you, with your friends and colleagues another day. What have we got coming up? We have some great webinars coming up in the future. We have our next one is going to be with Donald Taylor about whether the business should be our #1 priority. And then we have one coming up with Paul Matthews about similar to this topic in some ways. Do we give managers what they want, or is it more about what they need and how do we kind of handle that? If you want to continue these conversations, we do have a LinkedIn group you can come and have a look at. And of course, you can always continue the conversation on Twitter with #TJTalks. Thank you very much for your time, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you very much, Krystyna.
Thank you, Jo. Thanks for inviting me.